For years, millions of Facebook users pressed a button they were told would make them safer. Journalists pressed it, politicians pressed it, public figures pressed it, and eventually, Facebook began telling some users they had no choice. Either activate the feature or risk losing access to important parts of their account. At first, almost nobody questioned it. After all, the button promised protection, not advertising, not engagement, not profit, protection. But the more people trusted it, the more interesting the story became. Because the real story wasn't about what the button did, it was about what it represented. A moment when one of the most powerful companies in human history quietly decided who needed protection, who didn't, and how much influence a platform should have over the people who use it. This is the story of Facebook Protect, the button millions trusted, and the questions that followed. To understand why Facebook Protect became controversial, we first need to understand why Facebook created it. Because Facebook wasn't solving a small problem, the company was responding to something much bigger. Over the previous decade, social media had changed dramatically. What started as a place to share photos and connect with friends had become something far more powerful. Facebook was no longer just a social network. It had become part of politics, part of journalism, part of business, part of everyday life. And as Facebook became more important, Facebook accounts became more valuable. Hackers knew it. Governments knew it. Criminal groups knew it. A compromised account could spread misinformation, steal private conversations, damage reputations, or influence public opinion. The risks were growing, and Facebook knew it had a problem. The company needed a way to protect users who might become targets. Journalists, activists, government officials, public figures, people whose accounts carried influence. So Facebook introduced Facebook Protect. The idea sounded simple. Users identified as higher risk would receive stronger security protections. Additional verification, more security alerts, extra layers of account defense. On paper, it seemed difficult to criticize. In fact, many cybersecurity experts supported the concept. After all, stronger security is usually a good thing. And for a while, that was the end of the story. Or at least, that's what most people believed. For a while, Facebook Protect looked like a success story. The feature quietly expanded across the platform. More users received notifications. More accounts were enrolled, and more people began accepting Facebook's recommendation. At first, the feature focused on accounts considered high risk, people whose online presence carried influence, journalists, political candidates, government officials, activists, public figures, people who might attract unwanted attention. From a security perspective, the logic made sense. If attackers were more likely to target influential accounts, those accounts should probably receive stronger protection. But then something interesting happened. The program kept growing and growing and growing. Eventually, Facebook wasn't simply offering Facebook Protect to a small group of users. The company was actively encouraging larger numbers of people to activate it. For many users, the notification seemed unusual. It wasn't presented as a suggestion. It felt closer to a requirement. Some users were told that Facebook had identified their accounts as potentially important targets. And because of that, they needed to activate Facebook Protect. The message created a strange reaction. On one hand, people felt reassured. If Facebook was taking extra steps to protect them, that sounded positive. On the other hand, some users began asking a simple question. How exactly was Facebook deciding who needed protection? What made one account important enough to qualify? And why were some users receiving these notifications while millions of others were not? At first, those questions didn't receive much attention. Most people were focused on the promise: security, protection, safety. The feature appeared to be doing exactly what it was designed to do. Cybersecurity experts generally supported stronger authentication. Two-factor authentication had already become a standard recommendation. Security alerts were common. Identity verification wasn't unusual. Nothing about Facebook Protect seemed particularly controversial. At least not yet. But while the public focused on the security benefits, something else was happening in the background. Facebook was becoming far more than a social media company. By this point, billions of people depended on the platform for communication. News spread through Facebook. Businesses relied on Facebook. Political campaigns relied on Facebook. Communities formed on Facebook. Entire industries depended on Facebook's infrastructure. And the larger the platform became, the more important questions started to emerge. When a company influences the communication habits of billions of people, where does security end? And where does power begin? At first, the distinction seemed obvious. Facebook Protect was simply a security feature, a digital lock on a digital door. Nothing more. But some observers weren't entirely convinced, because history had already shown that technology companies rarely remain simple. The bigger they become, the more influence they accumulate. And influence often creates new questions. Questions about responsibility, questions about transparency, questions about control, questions that would eventually follow Facebook Protect itself. Not because the feature was secretly malicious, not because it was hiding some dramatic conspiracy, but because it existed inside something much larger, a platform with unprecedented reach, unprecedented influence, and unprecedented access to information. The feature continued expanding. Millions of users kept trusting it. The network kept growing. And for a while, that appeared to be the end of the story, until people started looking more closely. And that's when the real questions began. The first questions didn't come from ordinary users. They came from researchers, journalists, cybersecurity experts, and people who spent their careers studying how large technology platforms operate. At first, the questions seemed harmless. What criteria was Facebook using? How did the company determine who was considered a high-risk target? What signals were being analyzed? What data was being used? And perhaps, most importantly, who was making those decisions? Facebook's explanation appeared straightforward. The company said it used a combination of signals to identify accounts that might face elevated security risks, public visibility, potential influence, the likelihood of being targeted. Factors like these were part of the process. For many people, that answer was enough. But others wanted more detail, because identifying vulnerable accounts sounds simple in theory. In practice, it's much more complicated. Imagine trying to determine which individuals among billions of users are important enough to receive additional protection. Where do you draw the line? Who qualifies? Who doesn't? And who gets to decide? The deeper researchers looked into those questions. The more they realized that Facebook Protect wasn't just a cybersecurity tool. It was also a reflection of how Facebook viewed its own platform. Because, in order to protect certain accounts, Facebook first had to determine which accounts mattered most. And that idea raised an uncomfortable possibility. Whether intentionally or not, the company had created a system that categorized influence, not publicly, not visibly, but internally. A system capable of identifying people who had greater potential impact than others. Again, there was nothing inherently wrong with that. Most large platforms prioritize resources. Most organizations assess risk. Most security programs focus on likely targets. But the concept itself fascinated observers because it revealed something about the scale of Facebook's power. The company wasn't simply hosting conversations. It was mapping influence, understanding networks, identifying key individuals, analyzing relationships between users. The more experts discussed the subject, the less the conversation focused on passwords and security alerts. Instead, attention shifted toward a much bigger question. How much should a platform know about its users? Not just who they are, but how important they are, how influential they are, and how likely they are to shape public conversations. By this point, Facebook Protect had become something unexpected, a security feature that had accidentally opened the door to a much larger discussion. And once that discussion began, people started looking beyond the button itself, beyond the notifications, beyond the security settings, toward the massive system operating underneath. A system most users never saw. A system most users never thought about. A system that connected billions of people every single day. And the deeper investigators looked into that system, the bigger the story became. Because Facebook Protect wasn't the destination, it was the doorway. The doorway to understanding how one of the most powerful platforms on Earth actually worked. And what researchers discovered next would transform the conversation completely. At this point, it's important to clarify something. Researchers didn't uncover a hidden conspiracy. They didn't discover a secret control room. And they didn't find evidence that Facebook Protect itself was designed to harm users. The real discovery was something much more interesting. The feature revealed the scale of a system most people rarely think about. Because Facebook Protect only worked if Facebook understood its platform incredibly well. To identify influential users, the company first needed to understand influence. To identify potential targets, the company first needed to understand networks. And to protect important accounts, the company first needed to know which accounts mattered most. That realization shifted the entire conversation. Suddenly, people weren't asking questions about Facebook Protect. They were asking questions about Facebook itself. The platform contained billions of users, trillions of interactions, messages, comments, groups, pages, communities, relationships, connections. Every day, enormous amounts of information flowed through the system. And behind the scenes, algorithms worked continuously to organize that complexity. Not because someone was manually tracking every user. That would be impossible. But because modern platforms rely on automated systems capable of recognizing patterns at extraordinary scales. Patterns of communication, patterns of influence, patterns of behavior, patterns of connection. The more researchers examined the platform, the clearer one thing became. Facebook wasn't simply a website. It was an ecosystem, a digital environment so large that no individual could fully understand it, not even most employees. Imagine standing in the middle of a city with billions of roads. Every second, people move between those roads. Some roads are busy, others are quiet. Some connect thousands of people, others connect millions. Now imagine trying to understand that entire city in real time. That's the challenge modern platforms face every day. And Facebook had spent years building systems designed to solve that challenge. Facebook Protect was simply one visible example of those systems, a small window into a much larger machine. And that's why the story became fascinating. Because the button itself wasn't the most important part. The infrastructure behind it was the ability to identify risk, the ability to identify influence, the ability to understand relationships at a scale never before seen in human history. For supporters, that capability represented progress, better security, better protection, better tools. But critics saw something different. They saw a platform gaining unprecedented knowledge about the people who depended on it, not necessarily because of bad intentions, but because scale itself creates power. The larger a system becomes, the more influence it naturally acquires. And Facebook had become one of the largest systems ever built. By now, the discussion surrounding Facebook Protect had evolved far beyond cybersecurity. It had become part of a broader debate about technology. How much trust should people place in platforms? How much responsibility should those platforms carry? And what happens when a company becomes powerful enough to shape how billions of people communicate? Those questions didn't begin with Facebook Protect, and they certainly didn't end there. But the feature helped bring those questions into the spotlight, because sometimes a simple button can reveal something much bigger hiding underneath. Not a secret, not a conspiracy, but a reality that was already there, waiting for people to notice it. So, was Facebook Protect actually dangerous? Not in the way many people expected. There was no hidden virus, no secret hacking tool, no dramatic conspiracy. In fact, from a cybersecurity perspective, many experts would argue that stronger protection was a good thing. But that was never the most important lesson. The real lesson was what Facebook Protect revealed about the modern internet. A simple security feature exposed something much larger. The extraordinary amount of influence that technology platforms now have over our daily lives. Because before Facebook could protect certain users, it first had to understand them, their networks, their influence, their role within a much larger digital ecosystem. And that reality raises questions that go far beyond Facebook. Questions about trust, questions about transparency, questions about power. Today, billions of people rely on platforms they do not fully understand. Platforms that shape conversations, influence decisions, and connect entire societies. Facebook Protect wasn't the story. It was simply a reminder that behind every button we press, there may be a system far larger than we realize. And perhaps the most important question isn't whether we trust the button. It's whether we understand the platform behind it. Because in the digital age, understanding may be the most valuable form of protection of all. So, was Facebook Protect actually dangerous? Not in the way many people expected. There was no hidden virus, no secret hacking tool, no dramatic conspiracy. In fact, from a cybersecurity perspective, many experts would argue that stronger protection was a good thing, but that was never the most important lesson. The real lesson was what Facebook Protect revealed about the modern internet. A simple security feature exposed something much larger: the extraordinary amount of influence that technology platforms now have over our daily lives. Because before Facebook could protect certain users, it first had to understand them, their networks, their influence, their role within a much larger digital ecosystem. And that reality raises questions that go far beyond Facebook. Questions about trust, questions about transparency, questions about power. Today, billions of people rely on platforms they do not fully understand. Platforms that shape conversations, influence decisions, and connect entire societies. Facebook Protect wasn't the story. It was simply a reminder that behind every button we press, there may be a system far larger than we realize. And perhaps the most important question isn't whether we trust the button, it's whether we understand the platform behind it. Because in the digital age, understanding may be the most valuable form of protection of all.